Welcome in, Paul Kuharsky podcast. I was talking to some people here, and apparently not everyone. So good to see you. More of you here. Titans lose 24-17 to the Jets in ugly fashion, that reminiscent of what they did a couple days ago, 7 days ago in Chicago. Really, really poor. Will Levis playing hero ball again. I've said I think he's got a Superman complex, and really don't like punt protection being as bad as it is. So a lot of problems going on all over the place for this team. Didn't really improve from 1 week to the next. Glad to see other people popping in here. Jeff, Cyrus Gain, Merck, D-Gup, Teacoff. Should they consider moving on from Levis? They're not going to. I mean, they don't really have anybody to move on from Levis. They're not going to move on from Levis a couple games into the season. So I wouldn't expect that. If it trends this direction and he can't get over it, I think you could see a scenario where they say sit him down for a game and let him watch. I don't know. I think that's the worst case scenario for him. But I don't see that happening. They're going to stick with their guy. And I just think Levis is going to get every chance to play as long as he can and play his way out of some of this stuff. He wasn't making these kind of mistakes last year when he was hardly great. But the thing about what he did last year was, things were more wide open and they played kind of to his strength in terms of throwing deep. Now they're trying to compact things and make things what you would think would be easier than they were last year. But in kind of compacting things and making them easier, it's made it more difficult for him, clearly. And making these quicker, smarter decisions has not been his forte so far. Stonehouse is shell-shocked and having a hard time. And he walked off the field, much like Callahan greeted Levis after the bad play with what the fuck. Stonehouse walked off the field like, what the fuck? His life's in danger. 2 of 11 times he's gone back to field the ball to punt. He's been blocked. That's a terrible, terrible ratio. And I think I had tweeted out the stat, something like 11 of 26 full series in 2 games. They have gone 3 and out or given the ball up in less than 3 plays. 3 or fewer in 6 of 11 series and in 5 of 12 full series. So 11 of 23 series, 3 and out or worse, just atrocious. So, one person here says the play calling is not what was sold to the public in hiring Callahan. Well, it's 2 games. And this person who continues to go with the nickname that I don't like, play calling is what it is because he can't trust Levis. In my opinion, asks Teacoff, in my opinion, is this a badly built team or is it the coaching and scheme? Well, I mean, it's a much more talented team than they've had the last 2 years. Much more talented team than they've had the last 2 years. So I don't think it's badly built. But the offensive line still hasn't gelled and gotten as good as it's going to be. Quarterback isn't very good right now, and he may not turn out to be good enough. Hopkins is not playing at full strength, and that's hurting them. He played, had the snaps here. Hopkins played 26 snaps. Burks played 30 snaps. Burks had 1 chance to do something. He had the ball in his hands on an underthrown ball that he came back to and made a nice play on, but inevitably Burks burked and couldn't hold on to it. Gave it up to a guy that he's got outweighed by 45 pounds probably, maybe more than that. So I don't think it's a badly built team. I think the depth is poor, which is showing up on special teams. So TK says, and I think fairly so, what I'm seeing is a fan base that sold themselves a 10-win team, ignoring all the red flags that are still here. And I think that's fair. We shouldn't have got caught up in as much of the hype as we did, but it's inevitably what happens in the off season. You have a new coach who gets a honeymoon period and looked good. And they brought in a ton of new people. Some of the new people are pretty damn good. L'Jarius Sneed got beat for 126-yard play on the game-winning drive. But he was otherwise excellent. Mike Williams caught one ball all day on a woozy. Unfortunately, it was on the game-winning drive. The defense pretty damn good overall, but still gave up 24 points. The Titans can't win games giving up 24 points. Robert raises an interesting point here. Lost to Willis in Green Bay next week, and they need to erect fencing on all bridges over the Cumberland, or just put John Bon Jovi there on watch as he's patrolling there and saved somebody the other week. Do I think Callahan went conservative? I mean, there were times where they were conservative, and I think, it was because he can't trust Willis at certain points. How do I discern what's growing pains and what's bad play calling and coaching? I mean, I don't think the play calling was terrible by any means. They were in it. Look, they cost themselves 3 points with Levis's dumb play, and the punt block turned into 3 points. So, and then they could have kicked a field goal at the end if things went the same. So they could have won the game if they hadn't made the 2 really stupid plays and then had that drive at the end of the game. But you can't extract those things. They want to do a lot of extracting when they talk. If we didn't do this and we didn't do that, then we're in great shape. Well, you can't take that away. I talked to Nick Westbrook-Akine, and he says after the game, when I'm asking and guys are saying, no, Levis is not playing hero ball, I say, well, he's not he's not playing hero ball, and Nick Westbrook-Akine says, well, if he completes that ball to Sharp and it breaks, we're not having this conversation. Well, of course we're not. I mean, how do we just take a play that was a disaster and reverse it? Yeah. If the play broke and it was good, you win the game probably, and we're having a different conversation. But it didn't. It didn't. So we're not having that conversation, Nick. We're having this conversation about how it went badly. So let's talk about what happened and not reimagine what could have happened. I don't want to reimagine what could have happened. I want to talk about what happened. And I think there's too much of that reimagination. Let's all retweet here. We'll get some more people in here, and that'll be even better. Steven says, Levis hasn't been terrible. He's had 2 horrible turnovers. We can't put it all on him. Today he played well outside of the turnover. We had another turnover that really wasn't his fault. He wasn't super efficient. I mean, I don't think you can say he played great. He had a nice run that set them up for 4 plays from down by the goal line, and they couldn't get through there. It's 19 of 28 for 192 yards. It's not enough. A touchdown and an interception, 84.2 rating. I mean, I want more. I want more out of Brian Callahan's offense. They ran for 130 on 28 carries. But Aaron Rodgers, who was a shell of himself, I thought, threw 18 for 30 for 176, fewer yards, 2 sacks, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He didn't throw for anything longer than 26, 98.7 rating, but a winning effort. You're allowed to want more from Will Levis than he gave you today. And again, you can't excise the bad plays. You can't. The performance is the performance. Funny thing is, Keith says, it was the same theme as last week, dominating the game. I had film that we were going to lose it in the second. I had a film, maybe you had a feeling that we were going to lose it in the second half. I mean, this team's terrible in the second half. Coming into today, in the last 35 games, it averaged 6.2 points in the second half. The worst in the league by over 2 points. He'd been outscored by the second worst team in the last 35 games in the NFL by over 80 points. Bama Brad says he played winning ball with this D if he just cut the Wentz plays. Well, he didn't cut the Wentz plays, so he didn't play winning ball. He played losing ball. You know when he plays winning ball? If they win. If they win, then he played winning ball. But if they lose and his mistake contribute to the loss, then he didn't play winning ball. That's how it works. You can't take the game and excise what you didn't like and say, minus that stuff, he was good enough. That's not how it works. That's not how it works here. You can find places. You can go listen to The Zone tomorrow. They'll do that all day long. They'll talk about how, but for this and that, it was good enough and everything's going to be fine. All day tomorrow you can get that there. You're not going to get it here. It's not what we do. Why are there so many Levis apologists? Chris Butler wants to know. They're filled with hope. They want hope, hope, hope. I think Levis still has a chance. Still has a chance. It's only his 11th start. 11 starts isn't a lot. These coaches have to get through to him. He's talking about rewiring his brain. I think he's a reasonably bright guy. Not in those moments, he's not bright enough. But there's still possibility. There have been guys, and maybe I'll try to look at this week, who had a shitty 11 starts. Peyton Manning amongst them. He's not Peyton Manning, but we know. Do I think Malik could have won these last two games? Absolutely not. Malik Willis, I didn't see what he did today, but he's horrible. He's not as Levis is not a good processor. Malik is a worse processor. Very slow to see what's going on. I'm sure they dumb things down to an incredible degree for him. And if they get a couple wins out of him, God bless Matt LaFleur. But he is not a good quarterback. Will Levis might not have a career in the NFL, but Malik is definitely not going to have a career in the NFL as anything more than a backup. This D is good, but that roughing the passer on Jeff can't happen. And that roughing the passer on Jeff is absolutely legit. If you want the call that went in the Titans' favor on Johnson, then you have to accept the call that goes against Jeff. That's the way it's adjudicated in the NFL now. So you have to take the one to get the other. I'd rather see neither. But that's the way it goes now. Now, Callahan said Jeff's hand was kind of hit into his face, and it's an unfortunate deal. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's the case or not. But can't happen. The offense looks no different than last year, D. Gup says. I know they're scared of what Levis will do, but as a fan, it's getting tiring. I mean, hear the same thing over and over. Tim Kelly's scheme was better than this. At times, it was better than this. Now, he was limited by things. The offensive line was worse. The weapons were worse. But I'd like to see Tim Kelly's scheme with what we have here. But I also think Brian Callahan gets a grace period. And Will Levis, quite frankly, gets a grace period with everything being new. We just didn't expect to have to give him a grace period. They should have won one of these two games. If they were 1-1, people would be much calmer. Now, can they win the next two and be 2-2? Conceivably, yes, based on the quarterbacks that they're going to see. But they have not adjusted well in the last two games in the second half, and it's not been good. I thought O-line question here. I didn't think NPF was particularly good. I'll have to look at some more things to get a better sense of what was going on the offensive line. This seemed, John says, like a Vrabel game he would have eked out. Yeah, sometimes these uglier games were kind of a Vrabel thing. Depends on which roster we're talking about for Vrabel in terms of whether he would or would not have managed to eke it out or not. So I think it's fair. Vrabel firing back into favor given the Callahan start. It's pretty interesting. Teacoff, you're already up 7-0. You have the momentum. You take the sap. You keep the momentum. You go up 10-0. Oh, absolutely. I don't know who would disagree with this, especially given that they just went through this thing last week. And Callahan said it himself. It was the exact same thing. Exact same thing. So it's got to be better, and he's got to make it better right away. Dixie says the play calling was fine. Ridley was wide open, 1st and goal at the end of the game. Okay, well, they miss him 1st and goal at the end of the game. Guess what they had? 2nd and goal at the end of the game, 3rd and goal at the end of the game, and 4th and goal at the end of the game. So if you miss the guy on 1st and goal at the end of the game, is that it? Game over? Or do you have 3 more chances that you're allowed to do something with? That's my question. So Dixie's satisfied. They had an open receiver. The play calling was good to get that receiver open. Levis missed him, lost, but they had a guy open on 1st and goal at the end of the game. So that's satisfactory for Dixie. Everybody else in here, I think, is probably disappointed that they didn't go that they didn't, according to Dixie, they should have knelt the next 3 plays, and they could have come to the press conferences and said, listen, we lost the game, but we had a guy open on 1st and goal with 3 plays left in the game. So technically, if our quarterback had seen the guy, thrown an accurate pass to him, we would have tied the game, and we should be out there playing overtime now. So for Dixie, the whole thing's a wash, apparently. Sam is one of my best guys, says 100% fair to rail against the coaches for special teams gaffes, but the offensive issues are clearly Levis. I think they're far more Levis than, the special teams gaffes are not Stonehouse, though there are some people out there that are somehow concerned with how long it takes Stonehouse to get the ball off. We haven't heard that today like we heard it last week. There are problems going on in the interior of the blocking for the punt unit, problems that are not acceptable and can't be stood for. If there's a punt block next week, I'm not a fire the coach guy. If there's a punt block next week, something has to change. Amy Adams Strunk got involved last time, and that's why Craig Aukerman's coaching at Page. But Colt Anderson did not handle questions well this week. If he gets up there and has that weird grin, he better come with some answers. Ed Henry says, if that's Hopkins instead of Burks, that's a huge completion. Don't mind the throw. I mind the throw. You've got a big arm. Let the guy continue to run. But look, and maybe that's too much arm to ask for. Throw it earlier. You rolled out. You had clear vision. Throw it earlier. The guy, I don't know. Yeah. I can't wait for Colt, TK says, to act shocked when he gets asked about another block punt. And I'll be right there to ask it. When do the Titans go to backup quarterback? How many teams that are training a young quarterback and trying to develop him and are at their 11th start bench the guy who, was in a 1 touchdown game despite his gaffes? I just think it's an unreasonable ask. Isn't it an unreasonable ask? This is a fair question, CW. No, not CW, Chris Butler. And I touched on this in my column off the game. Do I think cutting guys like Haskins, who is a productive special teams player, has resulted in these blocked punts? Well, it resulted in today's blocked punt because Haskins would be playing Chestnut's spot. Chestnut, that was a 1-for-1. They kept Julius because he's a better running back than Haskins, and they paid the price for it today because Julius Chestnut got beat and gave up the blocked punt. And if Hassan Haskins was there, he would have done better because he's a better special teams player. So I bet that punt doesn't get blocked if they kept Hassan Haskins. So I mean, is it a little bit extreme to draw that? I don't know. I mean, no, it's a 1-for-1. Haskins would have been out there. That punt would have been blocked. That would have saved them 3 points. 3 points doesn't win them this game. They would have needed to found 4 points somewhere else, but that's it. Back to Sam. If the rest of the team sucked, I'd be right there with you, PK, but this defense seems extremely legit. And if you don't screw yourself, you should be able to win almost any game. I mean, I don't remember what I said that started this, but I don't disagree with you generally. But the defense didn't make plays on the last drive. Now they're tired and all of that. You know, Simmons was super defensive about it. The D-line rested at the beginning of that series. But Snead got beat the one big-time all game for 26 yards. Awuzie had a great play made on him for 26 yards. A Hall of Fame quarterback, made a couple plays in the biggest drive of the game. And then Hall got free and ran 20 yards untouched into the end zone. And the Titans got beat by a drive against the defense. They were tied. Who had the ball? You know, who was it, offense or defense that had the ball with 4 minutes left? It was the defense that had to face the team with the ball, and they didn't come through there. So the defense's great thing bugs me when it doesn't have a takeaway yet in 2 games in the season. And when it gave up a game-winning drive today. So I'm not sure how great the defense is. Had 2 sacks today of a quarterback that can't move. I think Landry was good. I think Ernest Jones was fantastic, and they're smart enough to give him the starting job. And Gibbons only played when Murray had to come out for a concussion check. But I'm not ready to anoint the defense as fantastic. I don't think that Jets offense is fantastic. Scored 24 points, didn't get the ball taken away from him, and drove for the game-winning touchdown. Why are backup quarterbacks so popular? This fan base seems to project all their hopes and dreams onto quarterback 2. I thought it would be over once we shipped Malik out. No. If quarterback 1 struggles, quarterback 2 is popular in every city in every NFL city in America. It's just the way it works. Sergeant Bubbles points out that the pass rush is slow as well. Seems like most sacks so far are covered sacks. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but the way this team is built, you know, they spent a lot of money on the corners. Who did they add in the pass rush? Sweat. But Simmons is the same and needs to continue to do better. Landry is the same. That other Arden Keith's position, they didn't address. They have no depth at outside linebacker. Landry played 49 of 56 snaps. Key played 45 of 56 snaps. Simmons 43. Sweat 38. So even Sweat played 68%. So those guys need to roll out and rest, which they were doing at the beginning of the game-winning drive. It's going to happen. In what sense was Simmons defensive after the game? Disappointing to hear that. He's always defensive. His tact post-game and more generally has been a bit of a letdown lately. I asked him about them needing rest at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the drive, and I asked him what happened. And he was like, what do you mean what happened? They went down and scored. And then he talked, of course, about the pass rush. He can't speak as a representative of the defense as a whole, which is what the captain and is what this great leader that they anoint him to be is supposed to do. You're supposed to be able to talk about the defense. Well, he only talks about the defensive line. He only talks about the pass rush. So I don't know. I'm not a Simmons guy. Robert says, if Levis gets beat by Malik Willis, he might not be able to come back from that in Titans fans' eyes. Well, if he gets beat by Malik Willis, but then he goes on a 6-game winning streak and the offense is great later on in the season, he'll come back. And if getting beat by Malik Willis is another notch in his belt for negative results, then he won't. So CW says this defense is missing another edge player to pair with Landry. Key is so meh. Yeah, Key needs to be a situational guy. They've said that from the beginning. The failure to really replace Autry was unfortunate, but they can't get everything in one off season. Steve asks about Landry, Sweat, and Simmons being out for the first part of that last drive. They're very tired. There were 3 and outs preceding that. They've been on the field a lot, and they simply needed to rest, and they decided to rest them. Simmons said there was a 6-play stretch earlier in the game when they were out. So it was just bad timing, unfortunate timing, but they need it. Bobby April was relatively crazy, like legitimately had lost it when Malarkey had to fire him. I don't think Chris here is asking, do we see a change in special teams coordinator soon? He says, reminds him of Malarkey's staff when a change was made early in the season. This is not a Bobby April situation. So didn't hear much from Sweat today, Robert Price says, which I agree with. It was a quieter game for sure. Let's go now. Let's see what's new. Bengals are also 0-2, teams figuring out who they are. Bengals are notoriously slow starters, but the Bengals have, some proven stuff. Jason wants Burks traded because he thinks Burks somehow has value. Yeah, I watched that play by Burks, and I'm like, I got to get that guy on my team. Well, what can I give up to get that guy back? Sam says, if only the talk Eddie gave Henry worked on quarterbacks too. Well, this would be the spot where, McNair, God rest his soul, would be talking to him. Maybe Hasselbeck, who's in town, could have a talk with him, and that would help in some way, shape, or form. Spears had a lot of carries early in this game. Somebody saying, are they figuring out how to use Spears? It's very early, and Pollard's better. So I don't really have that big an objection, though Pollard only averaged 3.6. Spears averaged 3.3. Spears also has a bad ankle, so he was out of this game at some point for that, and that's the one injury that they have to check up on. But I don't have a problem with Pollard getting a lot of action. I think Pollard is better, and I think he's good. So CW wants Levis put on a 3 strikes and you're out policy. Duck says this team isn't going on a 6-game winning streak. I would doubt it as well, but look, you have to allow for the possibilities that they're going to get better and be better. I am not. Sobro asked me who's in the press box with me. I can't see. I'm down in the visitors' radio booth. So they're like Titans radio booth, visiting coaches, 2 booths, Titans coaches, 2 booths, and then the press box. Dwight from Titans PR will definitely be here when I leave this in 15 minutes, and probably no reporters. Here's one thing that's shortened everybody's day is that we finished talking to Brian Callahan, and then Levis comes in immediately after him. And by the time we finish talking to both of them, it's been 20 minutes, and we get into the locker room, and tons of guys are gone. So Tannehill and Henry took a while to get in there. So we'd finish talking to Vrabel, and then we would go into the locker room, we'd get a bunch of guys, then we'd come back for Tannehill. So right now, it's a bad situation. So we've got a lot less quotes to sort through, a lot fewer conversations. And it may be time for somebody like me to sacrifice Levis, presume other people are going to ask good enough questions. Or if there's a game where maybe I could get away from focusing on Levis or write Levis from the perspective of other people in the locker room, go talk to offensive linemen, et cetera, et cetera. So we shall see. There's a decent bit of national media here today. Sarah Walsh, old friend, was here. Judy Batista from NFL.com or NFL Network was here. She was writing. Surprising amount, but the Jets are a draw, obviously. So Duck asks, is the football intelligence conversation with Will Levis worth having? Having with who? Turnovers happen, but his are self-inflicted. I mean, that's the only conversation that we're having. That's what everybody's writing. That's what I wrote 2 weeks in a row. I think he's got Superman complex. I urge you to go read my piece. And join paulkuharsky.com. If you're not a member of paulkuharsky.com, you're missing out. The New York Effect plus Robert. Thoughts on Latham this game around? I mean, he wasn't as bad. Latham was not as bad in this game as he was in the first game. I didn't notice him as much, which is a good sign for him, but I need some closer examination. Ed points out here, everyone pulling the plug on Levis after 2 weeks. If he plays well the next 2 weeks and they win, same people will want to put the gold jacket on him, which is absolutely true. Tian Braun says Levis is Nuke from Bull Durham. But Nuke got it together at some point, didn't he? Is Rusty available? The interception was not an interception by the quarterback. It was an interception by Burks. This is true, though statistically it doesn't work that way. Yeah, and the throw to Ridley, Robert, I agree. Right through Ridley's hands. No, that's no further explanation needed. Ridley said as much. He's got to catch it, and he was pissed at himself over that. Mike Vrabel's burner, overstating a little bit. If only the Titans had a coach known for great game plans and disciplined teams. Yeah. I think that's a little much. Robert says, I think the Carson Wentz comparison to Levis is spot on so far. Unfortunately, he can make the brilliant plays, but then make the truly boneheaded play 2 plays later. I think that's, not unfair. We'll see if he crumbles ultimately like Carson Wentz, but Carson Wentz's high was pretty high. We haven't seen Levis near there. Now his lows were, I think Levis has approached that territory. We'll say. Focus says, if he plays bad again next game, I would bench Levis early to teach him a lesson. So what lesson does that teach him, Focus? Like, you think he's not getting the lesson? He doesn't know that he's screwing up these plays? I don't think I wouldn't bench him to teach him a lesson. I might bench him to let him gather himself, to give him a breather, to let him figure some stuff out, get his head right. But to teach him a lesson is not, when's the last time we saw a guy sat to be taught a lesson? When we saw a starting quarterback sat to be taught a lesson. And again, the CW is very apologetic, thinking he didn't have a bad game. He didn't have a good game. And again, you want to take away the pathetic play. You can't take away. We're not in this conversation allowed to take away the bad play. We're not. It's part of the body of work. The whole body of work counts. All right, you're going to take away the bad play. I'm going to take away the touchdown, the rhythm. All right? So if you're allowed to take away the bad play, I'm allowed to take away the good play. And I mean, you guys, I think Mason Rudolph is an effective backup who could come in an emergency and, do everything. But if he started, you wouldn't like him at all. You'd say he's not dynamic enough. Where's the potential? The ceiling isn't high enough. Blah, 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 blah. Levis mistakes, Mr. Merck says, are backyardish mistakes and sign that he is yet to become a pro quarterback. I think we'd all agree on that, though if you look back at the Atlanta game last year, it's quite damn good. And if you look back at the Miami comeback last year, quite damn good. I mean, we know he's got those things in him, and he did that with a bad football team. This is a better football team talent-wise than the team that he did that with last year. So, I mean, still have to allow for the fact that he's the guy that did those things in those 2 games. So we'll see. Sergeant Bubbles, I may take you up on that. I'm going to look for others also who've had, 11 games comparable to Levis. What else we got, people? Keep them coming. We won't go too much longer. I mean, Jorian says everyone else in the AFC South is 0-2 besides the Texans. We have time to right the ship. Yeah, I mean, if you want to be even with the Colts and even with the Jags, it's terrific. Very admirable goal to be even with two other teams that also aren't going to the playoffs. John Beck says, you have to keep playing Levis. The fans want wins and think Rudolph would have given you those, but you're building longer term than what Rudolph would give you. I say you stay with Levis. I mean, that's what's going to happen. They're not benching Levis anytime soon. Roger McCreary, Robert Price points out, seemed to pop today. He's really developing into a nice piece. He's a good player. Glad that his shoulder injury wasn't worse and he returned. And so he's a good development for sure. Jamal Adams, by the way, made his debut today. You know how many snaps he played for the Titans? Two snaps for Jamal Adams in his Tennessee Titans debut. Everyone is afraid if you punish Levis, it'll break his confidence. That's life. They're paying you millions to make a common sense play. You always take your points. I just don't understand this idea of punish. Like, I guess benching equals punishing. But if you bench somebody, you want something better than him. And I honestly don't believe that Mason Rudolph is better than him. Also, like, you guys constantly, the vast majority of you, when the Titans are bad, are about getting a higher draft pick. So if you think Levis isn't the guy and you're going to want to replace him after this season, wouldn't you then want the high draft pick that comes from not doing well with Will Levis? Because Mason Rudolph will create for you a middling football team. And if you have a middling football team, if Mason Rudolph wins a couple of these games that look like this, that'll get you 7 or 8 wins. And guess what 7 or 8 wins does? It doesn't get you into the playoffs, and it gets you the 16th pick in the draft. And then you'll bitch about having the 16th pick in the draft instead of drafting 5th, which is where you last year wanted to be so that you could get Joe Alt. Or next year, if Levis proves not to be the guy, will get you in range of the quarterback that you want. So which is it? All of a sudden now you want to be a middling football team with Mason Rudolph. Because you can't believe that Mason Rudolph, maybe you do believe he'll get you the 7th spot and into the wild card round, but you can't believe that Mason Rudolph's taking you anywhere in the playoffs. Now, I'm a big get into the playoffs any way you can guy. And even I think it's foolish to say, play Mason Rudolph because he got a chance of getting you into playoffs. And you get into the playoffs, and you guys thought you couldn't win in the playoffs with Ryan Tannehill. Well, you sure as hell aren't going to win in the playoffs with Mason Rudolph. So you want them to play well enough with Mason Rudolph to maybe have a chance to get into the playoffs where they would get clobbered because they have an inferior quarterback to anybody else that would get into the playoffs, and then wind up with the 16th or the 17th pick in the draft, or maybe higher, and then not be able to get the quarterback you want to replace Will Levis. So explain that whole scenario to me. I don't really get it at all. Fans wanted playoffs. Once they're there, they wanted wins. Fans did not want an attempt at the playoffs the last 2 years when things soured and we said, may stick it out here. Maybe they could turn things around. They didn't. Most of the fans I talked to did not want playoffs when they were 7-9-ish and they had a fight with the Jags, the Josh Dobbs game. They didn't see much fruit coming out of winning that game and getting into the playoffs. They wanted worse. They wanted the pick. It's all about the draft. Never mind the games that are going on now that I wait all year for. I'm more about the draft. I'm more about April. There was a lot of that. But now, all of a sudden, everybody's concerned with you got to win games with Mason Rudolph, because getting a 6 or 7 wins with Mason Rudolph is the way to go. This is John Gall knows what they said. They said tank. But now you're inconsistent. All I want you to be is to be consistent. John Gall's dead on here. They were mad that the Titans ended up at 7 wins instead of at 7 in the draft instead of 5. They were mad. So I don't know. Yeah, here's the question. Does Mason have the ability to go up against Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, Josh Allen? Maybe one. Maybe the Titans win one of those games with defense and special teams. No. Maybe they win one of those games on defense if they actually turn things around and turn into a much better team and Mason Rudolph was quarterbacking efficiently. But they're not going on any kind of long playoff run with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. Now you give Will Levis a chance. Maybe he turns into something. Probably not this year that they're going to go on a deep playoff run. But you give him a chance. You see what he is. If he's not it, then you go for the next guy. But the idea that you want Mason Rudolph to be your quarterback is silly. Yeah, Washington had 2 punts blocked in back-to-back games in 2022, I think. Andrew Allen asking if any teams had punt blocked in 2 straight weeks. Can't remember seeing that. I mean, you have to be like Rain Man to remember seeing that. At what point in the season, Brooks wants to know, do the Titans get their answer about Levis long-term? A point much further on in the season than week 2. Much further on. Oh, come on. Mike in NYC says Callahan showing up as quarterback is Bush League. Give me a break. It's a completely normal reaction. Coaches yell at players on the sideline all the time. Don't be a baby. Don't be that guy. It's completely appropriate reaction. He's not showing him up. He's reacting in the moment. He's coaching in the moment. Some of these people want him benched and you can't handle him being yelled at? Give me a break. Give me a break. Robert says it isn't showing up yet in wins, but Sweat up front taking up linemen is allowing most of the good line backing pressure inside. Yeah, it's helping. It wasn't as good this week as it was last week. Here's a good parting thought from somebody with an unreadable handle. You want Levis to be who he can be, not what he is at the moment. Brandon backing Jamal. Yes, they work players back in slowly. D-Hop came back in with only so many snaps the first game, so the same for Jamal. D-Hop came back with 17 snaps that were completely ineffective. If they're working Adams back 2 snaps at a time, it's going to be the fucking end of the season before we see something meaningful. 2 snaps. Next week we get 4 snaps. The week after that we get 8 snaps. Then finally something meaningful and impactful. 2 snaps is the same as not playing. The same. A couple more and we're out. Jamie Ball says Sweat was getting the double teams this week instead of Simmons. Simmons should be showing up more. Don't tell Simmons that. Do not tell Simmons that. Please. For the love of man. Brooks, we know that he says, I actually enjoy the honest reactions of Callahan. How does he compare to Vrabel in regards to what he gives the media? You know the answer to this. He gives us way more. He's way more candid. He's way more frank. He's way more honest. People who overreact to what he says and how he does it are going to make sure that's limited. When he said last week they could have punted on first down in the second half and take that and make it like he's throwing his offense under the bus, are going to take some of that out of him, which is really unfortunate. I think Brian Callahan, Troy's asking me for an assessment of his play calling in game. It's been a little conservative, but with cause, because his quarterback hasn't been up to the task. So, not, it's a collective thing. It's not strictly Brian Callahan. Join PaulKuharsky.com. Read Blake Bedingfield's scouting account of this game tomorrow. Read Mike Herndon on the Titans on Tuesday. Read everything that I write, everything the three of us write. And get your voicemails on these podcasts. Be a part of our private Facebook group. Much, much more for $7.50 a month, which is the price of less than the price of an expensive cocktail when you go out drinking. Need you there. So come join us. We want you as part of things. Don't block the box. Be sure to lock your locks. Tomorrow, I sit in for Robbie Stanley on Robbie and Rexroad on 102.5 The Game in Nashville. Come check it out, or you can listen to it streaming. You'll find directions for that on Twitter or elsewhere. I appreciate you coming in. Hope you recover from this loss tonight. Let's go watch a good game. Thanks, everybody. Good night.